Hello and welcome. He's a pioneer of world music, bringing together global performers for unique collaborations. But he also founded one of the biggest rock bands in the world, Genesis, before launching his own incredibly successful solo career. This week on 101, meet the musically creative genius, Peter Gabriel. Always something of a loner, his quiet early life in the English countryside was hardly an indication of how far-reaching his music would be eventually. Peter Gabriel's early efforts with the progressive rock band Genesis, formed while he was still at school, took a downhill turn as his strong will clashed with others in the group. Gabriel continued to be a remarkably creative force once he launched his solo career, winning multiple awards, composing not only intriguing melodies, incorporating the latest technological tools, but often providing a visual feast for his fans through his videos and stage shows. His collaborations with ethnically diverse artists prompted him to develop the Real World Studios and record label, along with WOMAD, the World of Music, Arts and Dance Movement. Beyond his prolific work as a musician, Peter Gabriel also co-founded Witness, a non-profit group aimed at using video and the internet to combat human rights abuses. Peter Gabriel, great to have some time with you. You've done so much, there's just so much to cover in such a short period of time, so I'm going to try as best I can. But let me start by asking how you prioritize your time nowadays between the music, which I know you're very obviously still active in, and of course the humanitarian work you do.
Well, I think whereas I used to be obsessively 100% music when I was a young man, now it's about a third music, a third technology, and a third what I call benefit projects of one sort or another.
What would you credit to giving you such a sort of long lifespan in this business, such a successibility in what is quite a fickle and transient business?
One thing about getting older is that you learn to, just to get on with who you are and not try and be all these other things. At the same time, I do still love experimentation. So, yeah, but there's always new equipment being designed, and often, new toys lead you into new directions, and like many musicians, I love playing around with new toys, and I think that sort of childish sense of discovery, exploration and fun is what keeps it alive for you, and you hope for your audience.
Let me take you back to your place of birth, Chobham in Surrey, in England. Very quiet place, in the 50s, pretty much in the countryside in England. Was it a quiet childhood for you? What are your strongest memories?
Yeah, it was a farm. It was a dairy farm, although my dad is an electrical engineer and inventor. I mean, he and an Italian guy designed a thing called Data Program, which was basically entertainment on demand, education, home shopping, all the sort of things that we now take for granted. But this was in 1971. There was access through the rotary dial of a telephone, and his company, it was based around pay TV, and his company, Rediffusion, thought people will never pay for television. So I'm used to him campaigning for the future, and my mum, I think, was more of a sort of emotional side and musical side, and the farm was a place I loved to escape to, it was all girls on the farm, so we used to play in the hay, and it was a wonderful life.
Well, your mother, Edith, actually was credited with giving you music lessons early on. She was from a musical family, wasn't she? And
yeah, I mean, not professional. And in fact, there was on my dad's side, one of his sisters had sung opera, but in fact, she gave me £5 once to learn how real singers sing. And I just...
It was this later in life, Paul.
Yeah, I was singing professionally then, so I think there was a loaded message, but I just bought a Beatles record instead. So
she took the clarinet, is that right?
I never got the no, she didn't really teach me anything directly, but she still will play the piano, and so I would grow up listening to music, but I tried to learn flute and oboe. Both I was spectacularally bad, but and a pretty bad drummer, but the drums was louder than everything else, so that's what I stuck with for a while.
You went to private schools, what they call public schools in Britain, of course, including the very magnificent-looking Charter House set out in the countryside there. A very established, old and established British school, and quite elite in many ways. How did you fit in there?
I was a bit of a loner, I didn't enjoy the experience, so it was a little more like Tom Brown's School Days, and it was what they call fagging, you know, where the young boys work for the old boys. And it was a sort of, I mean, there were very kind and good, inspiring people there, but a lot of it was an atmosphere of fear and bullying, and it was either sports people or academic people, and I didn't really belong, and I wasn't great musically either, so I didn't really feel I had a place. Later on, I got much more relaxed, and you know, it was the hippie time, 67, I was 17, so we would go into the chapel and I would have some bells hidden under my trouser legs, just to show I was a hippie but not identify it so I could be punished.
Now, it was when you were 17 that you got together with other members from Charterhouse and created, 4 other members, and you created Genesis. Yeah. And it was Jonathan King, who was also a former Charterhouse alumni, if you like, who actually produced your first album.
That's correct.
What were your expectations in those days? You know, what were you hoping to achieve?
Make a record, you know, it just seemed like such a spectacular, exciting thing to do, and
he was a known producer, of course.
Yeah, he was a known producer, and he'd come down in his big sports car, and it was all that stuff.
When it was established that you were going into a musical sort of career, how did your parents feel?
Well, they've never been negative, but they were worried, like all the parents of the group, that we'd had 2 or 3 years and weren't really making much progress, certainly hadn't proved we could live off it, you know, and we were living in a cottage near Dorking and baking our own bread and yogurt, and it was a bit hand to mouth, and everyone, all these agents would promise to come down from London, and it was extraordinary the number of punctures and excuses that were delivered. Why? And in fact, one agent actually took about an hour and a half to tell us why Genesis should give up and to go back to bricklaying or wherever it was we crawled out of. And it was a mean business, and also I think exciting, because there were more gangsters for sure in those days. It was less corporate, but there was also a lot of passion and enthusiasm, and wonderful, colourful, mischievous characters.
Less processed, I think, overall, isn't it?
Yeah.
Genesis started to do very well and get recognition across Britain and Europe, and I know, you know, you were actually out there at that time getting quite a reputation, largely because of the costumes and things that you had on stage and you were wearing. Some very bizarre ones. What was the strangest one you recall wearing?
The Slipper Man, which was a character in The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which was a sort of diseased, decadent
amoeba-like, wasn't it?
Of yes, and there were certain parts of the anatomy which were inflatable.
Did I mean, I know to some degree, actually, it was this arriving on stage with some funny costumes that did make the others, like in the band, raise their eyebrows.
Not just, I mean, they hated it often, and you've probably spoken to Phil about it, but, you know, so I had to do all this on my own privately, and then arrive at the night of the gig armed with my bag of tricks.
And they didn't know, did they?
No, often they didn't know until, I mean, some of the difficult ones to get on, I'd try out in the sort of rehearsal before the gig, and there'd be these sort of grunts and looks of disdain, and, you know, you're cheapening our art. But then when they saw us on the front pages of the Melody Maker the following week, I thought, okay.
It's interesting you're so flamboyant on stage, because you're essentially, you know, you come across a lot of the time as quite a shy character.
I think I am, but I think a lot of performers are quite like that, actually, that they have this other persona. And I remember I went to a lecture on masks at the Commonwealth Institute in London, and these kids were just putting on masks and suddenly becoming these alter egos. And, you know, in our culture, we often see masks as something you hide behind. But in many other cultures, it's actually the vehicle through which you come out. So I think that was how I was using it.
Now, in those early years of Genesis, you went through quite a few drummers, I think 3 drummers, then finally Phil Collins auditioned in 1970. And it was at your home, your parents' home. Yeah. And I gather he was given a pair of swimming trunks and told, go and swim while these others who were before you are going to audition. Well,
that's right. It's typical Phil. He arrived early. You know, most of the rest of us arrived late. But and I devised, you know, as the sort of drum freak, a series of tests, because I hate auditions. And one of the problems that we'd had with the other drummer, who was reasonable, but he was really slow learning, and the more ambitious we got with the music, you know, we'd have to painstakingly, you know, dubba dubba. I mean, that's not fair, but it wasn't. So the tests, we had a number of pieces that we play the drummer, and then they asked him to play along with it. So it was not only trying to get the feel, but the capacity to learn. Phil went outside and was at the pool and thought, oh, there's some sort of test thing going on here. I'll listen hard. And of course, by the time he got to play, because I think he heard two guys before him, he knew all the parts. But actually, it's a funny thing, because I knew when Phil sat down at the drum seat, before he played a note, that he was really in command of what he did. You know, some people just have a sense when someone gets in the car or whatever, you just know, yeah, they're in command of their instrument, they know what they're doing. And I used to have a lot of fun, you know, telling drummers some of the drum parts that I would love to have played myself. And of course, when Phil came along, that finished.
Right,
he was so good.
And he's very different as a sort of Chiswick lad, local boy, you know, very much a streetwise kid, and he was mixing suddenly with these kids who were like privately educated. Very different kind of fit, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, we had a sort of shared sense of humour, and I mean, I enjoyed Phil's company very much. And he lightened it up sometimes, because, you know, I would get into these big rows with, particularly with Tony, who was also a great friend, but we had these major, you know, run-ins.
There were a lot of tensions, as you mentioned, in the band. You actually told them you were going to leave after the, well, when Lamb Lies Down had been produced. But
74.
Actually, yeah, and you stayed on for the 8 months or so for the tour of it.
Well, it was because it was a sort of stupid time from a sort of career or financial point of view, because we'd had big debts, and we were just sort of clearing our debts and about to make money. And so I'd go and leave, but it was, it felt claustrophobic, and it didn't feel right, and I wanted to do other things. I had an offer to do some ideas sort of for film for William Friedkin, who'd just come off The Exorcist at the time, and the band weren't going to make any time for me to do any outside projects. And I mean, later that changed, but and then the final nail on the coffin was my first, when my daughter was born, and they didn't think she was going to survive, and we had 2 weeks of hell and premature ward, and there was very little sort of tolerance and understanding from the band, and that was obviously more important to me than finishing the album, which was also going on at the time. So that also caused some tension, and but I did feel guilty that I was sort of scuppering the band's chances, or that's what they felt. I actually felt that as a group of songwriters, they would do fine after I left, which they actually did much better after I had left. But at the time, they were saying, you know, we worked so hard for all this time. You're not giving us a chance. If you stay on and do these extra dates, then we'll have enough money to sort of have a little quiet time, find someone else, etc. So I agreed to do those dates, and it felt very sort of weird, because I felt I was sort of lying to the audience in a way, because I was there, but I knew, because they wouldn't allow me to announce that I was going, because they thought that would kill the tickets on the gigs. I don't think it would have done, but anyway, it was a very strange period, so it was good to end it.
In retrospect, do you think you were more of a loner as a solo artist at heart than a band member?
No, I think I love collaborations, but I also like getting my own way.
Well, that's what I mean.
but I mean, so I love to do both, really. It's just when you've got a really clear idea and you're passionate about something, you want it done right. And sometimes the band's perfect environment, and they make something more than what you had imagined, and sometimes it isn't. So I felt enormous. I mean, I didn't rush into a solo career. I wanted out of the music business, and
you took time off, didn't you? Because Salisbury Hill talks about that the time on your own.
Yeah, and it was 2 years pretty much, and I was sort of growing cabbages and children. So, but I was thinking of film, which I was also passionate about. But really, I thought, well, actually, you know, I can do this thing, and I'm not sure what else I can do. So I got back into music again, and still hoping that other people might cover the songs and I wouldn't have to go out and front it. But you know, no one really wanted to do that. So.
You said how, as a young lad, you were very much into your own life, you know, turning up the music, playing these instruments and so on. Who were your mentors in life? Who did you then turn to for inspiration?
Spike Milligan was one of my heroes, because I just think he was an extraordinary lateral comic and just allowed the brain to make these leaps, and he could say very profound things and make them very funny at the same time. I still have enormous respect for great comedians, and for our Human Rights Thing Witness once, we had Robin Williams just improvising on a sort of PSA, whatever you call it, for
public service announcement, yeah.
Yeah, ad, effectively. But he was just outstanding, and boof, 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 and you just see the brain working at great speed and to great effect. And I think, you know, we all need to laugh a lot more than we do.
There was a price to pay, though, for your professional success and the time that's gone on, you know, from the divorce to difficult relationships, even with your daughter for a while as well. Yeah. When you look at the cost it's taken on your life, you know, how do you regard that price you've paid?
I think I've been very lucky because, you know, I've found ways through most of the problems. You know, I get on well with my ex-wife, and you know, I think a natural part of divorce is that the kids, when they're torn apart, tend to gravitate to one or the other, and then sometimes switch. But so we found a way through all of that stuff, and yeah, with help from therapy. But it was, I think, yeah, there was the feeling that when you joined the band, you joined the army, and there wasn't really room for another life. And that's one of the great advantages of being on my own as an artist, is that I can say when I work and that I'm going to go back and kiss the kids goodnight and all that. And so that's very important to me.
It's easier, of course, when people are coming to you now because of your established success too.
Exactly. It's a lot easier when you're successful.
You also put a lot of that expression into your music, the songs you wrote and the way sometimes the music was structured as well. Did you find that quite therapeutic, getting it all out there like that?
Yeah, and the other thing is, which I found really extraordinary at first, is that you don't know how some of the songs are going to hit people, and a number of people, including actually a well-known musician and a comedian, in fact, have said that they were contemplating suicide and didn't because they had "Don't Give Up" as the song, and you think, wow, and you suddenly realize that it's like a toolbox full of emotional tools when you put out music and you put some real feeling in it, and so I'm a bit more conscious of that, and grief, I think, is still something that hasn't really got a. I mean, there are some songs that deal with it, but maybe not enough. So that was one where I actually sort of thought of what I was trying to do. And a friend recently lost his daughter and used the song. But I think it would be good for other artists too to think sometimes of how the stuff might get used, as well as just wanting to get their own things out.
It's interesting that in the 1980s you became well known for getting into the activism with Amnesty International. You're also far more into the championing human rights. What prompted that at that time?
Well, I think there were a number of things. I think I was just getting more interested in what was happening in the world, and I think naturally as you get a little older you get a little less selfish, and then I wrote the Biko song, and that was a difficult decision for me because you know, I hadn't written anything overtly political before, and Tom Robinson was very helpful in encouraging me, because I thought there wouldn't be any credibility for this song, and he was saying, well, A, it's a good song, B, if attention and money goes in the right direction, it doesn't matter what people think of you, so get on with it. And that, you know, was a very important song to me, because it was sort of my calling card saying, come and get me for anyone who had a cause.
Which they did.
Yeah, which they did. And then Bono rang up and said, you know, we're doing this tour in America, '86 for Amnesty, and he said, well, it was anyway. that song, we have to have you on this tour. And so that got me to meet a lot of the people who've been tortured and been victims of human rights abuses. And so suddenly it was sitting right in front of me, and I couldn't walk away from it, and got more and more engaged.
In 1992, you co-founded a non-profit group called Witness to counter human rights abuses and to use the video and the internet for this. Tell me about that.
Well, that was, again, just a result of an experience on this, on these amnesty tours, because the 88 one we took around the world. And what astonished me was that you'd meet people who watched their family members being shot in front of them or tortured, and then those experiences would be completely denied and forgotten and buried. However, whenever there was a bit of video, even them telling their stories and experiences, or occasionally of the abuses, it was very hard for those in power to argue this didn't happen. So we thought, okay, let's get cameras out to activists, and human rights organizations weren't really doing that. They were using text. So we set up Witness. Reebok funded it, Lawyers Committee gave us a home, and you know, I think it's worked in 80 different countries now, and it's still, you know, relatively small. We haven't got to it doesn't reach people in the way that YouTube does, but it does try and make it a bit more secure. And there's some campaigns that have changed laws in various countries, and I think there's a lot more of that which can happen.
You've achieved so much, Peter, professionally and personally as well. You've won so many awards for your music and your humanitarian work. You're known to be a very hard worker, and I wonder, with all the things you've done, what do you feel is the biggest lesson you've learned in life?
Well, perseverance is one of them, and I think never underestimate what difference you could make or what you could do. And I think that, because I don't think I'm very smart, I don't think I'm very talented, but I'm an obstinate.
People might argue. People might argue that.
No, but I've seen other people, at every stage with everything I've done, who are smarter and better at them than I am, and that hasn't deterred me. So that's what I say to young people everywhere. Don't limit yourself or limit your expectations, because if you want to make a difference, if you want to change the world, it's all there.
You're very active, you're constantly evolving. Have you set yourself any long-term goals at the moment?
Well, I'm trying to get sort of life-work balance sorted out, and I love being a dad. I love my family life, and so getting that right with work, that's a goal. I'd like to do more sport, exercise. So these sort of personal goals, but and just to continue plugging away.
How would you like to be remembered? What legacy would you like to leave behind?
It's funny, we've got a project called thememory.com, which is partly dealing with this. And I have a 98-year-old dad, and I have a 2-year-old son, and I want to download enough of my dad that my 2-year-old, I mean, he knows him now, but can, as a 12-year-old or 20-year-old, can sort of feel him and smell him and know what made him tick. And so we're looking at various ideas that I think are quite interesting, and one of those is around a forest, so that it's a completely natural environment, but each tree has a sort of location, and as you approach it with your mobile phone, you suddenly start hearing your dad's voice, or seeing the pictures and hearing their stories, and so all this data is being kept in this position by this tree, and I'd like for my body to be getting moldy under a tree and feeding it, and full of worms, and becoming something useful.
But you'll certainly do some wonderful music and some great projects behind. Peter, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks. Sure.